Yali Madat, and welcome everyone. I'm really excited to get started in this talk, in this panel. We have Asif and Michelle joining me here. We're going to be talking about the future and how everything is just changing with what is going on in the world. So I'm just going to start with some general introductions. So I'll give a quick introduction of both Michelle and Asif, and also let them just say some few words in case I forgot anything. So I'm going to start with Michelle. So Michelle is a 19-year-old student who was born in Pakistan but raised in Canada. The really interesting thing about Michelle is she's currently attending a university called Minerva. So this is a new age university focused on global exposure and problem solving. So Michelle, do you want to tell us a little bit about, at a high level, we're going to dig into it in the talk, but where you are right now and what your plan is with Minerva over the next year?
Yeah, of course. So hi, everyone. I am currently actually located in South Korea. So it's kind of crazy. Didn't expect that, especially graduating from a Canadian high school, but here I am. Our university is a little different in that we spend our 4 years actually in 7 different countries across 4 different continents. So I spent my summer in San Francisco, but I'm in Korea now. We'll be spending the next semester in Berlin. And on the rosters, things like Hyderabad and Taipei and Buenos Aires, which is really awesome because there is this kind of cultural immersion and global exposure aspect of university. But I think that's just a cherry on top to the amazing methods of actually learning and the curriculum itself that comes with this university. So I'm very excited to kind of share that. But yeah, I think that's a bit of an overview.
So super cool just to have someone from South Korea tuning in here. Before attending Minerva, she was attending the Knowledge Society, TKS, which is an accelerator for driven teenagers. And at the Knowledge Society, at TKS, she worked in areas including virtual reality, cellular agriculture, human longevity, and artificial intelligence, building projects like using machine learning to detect skin cancer. So really, really cool things. She's currently focused on building her problem-solving skills and toolkit so she can improve the quality of life around the world and solve global problems. She's worked at companies like Zappos, CIBC Digital, and part of the TKS Foundations program, which is TKS program for ages 10 to 13 years old. So has done a lot in just 19 years, and we're really excited to have her on. So thanks for joining us, Michelle. Next, really excited to introduce you to Asif. If you don't already know him, he's just an incredible person who's making insane waves in the areas of technology. He was originally born in Tanzania, but grew up in Canada, started off as a software engineering in fintech, which stands for financial technology. He was a partner at TPG and Andreessen Horowitz, which, if you guys don't know those names, they are multi-billion-dollar funds. The leading private equity fund, I would say, is probably TPG, and the leading venture capital fund right now is Andreessen Horowitz. So incredible background. He sits on the boards of both public companies and private companies. He's a professor at Berkeley, founded and sold multiple businesses, ran companies including Ameritrade, Coinbase, and now is the head of Figure. So I just want to put into context how lucky we are to have Asif here, the experience that he brings at his breadth of context in all of these different areas, from venture capital to private equity to emerging technologies to leading universities around the world, and leading companies like Coinbase, if you haven't already heard of it, making a lot of moves. We're just really excited to have him. So Asif, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, listen, it's my absolute pleasure to be here. I think it's part of our duty, Seva, if you will, to make sure we're giving back in any way we can. And actually, I want to thank you, Naveed, and the whole community of volunteers. It's an amazing program. It's easy. I have the easy part. I just show up. So you guys do all the hard work, and so I really appreciate that you put in this effort, and it really helps our community a lot. So my genuine pleasure to be here.
And tell us where you're calling in from today.
I'm in San Francisco, so I've been living in San Francisco for a while, and so this is where I am in the heart of Silicon Valley.
So we have South Korea in Seoul with Michelle. We have San Francisco Bay Area with Asif, and I am currently tuning in from Guadalajara, Mexico. So I am definitely more nomadic. I've been moving around a lot this past year, from Miami to New York, Guadalajara, Costa Rica, Panama. And you guys don't know who I am if you're watching this. And so let me give you guys a quick introduction on me. My name is Naveed Nathu. I am the founder and CEO of the Knowledge Society, which is a global accelerator for young, ambitious teens who want to make an impact in the world through emerging technologies. The goal of the Knowledge Society is to really unlock human potential and build the next unicorn people who eventually impact billions. Before starting the Knowledge Society, I was the CEO of a company called Airpost, which is a cloud security company based in the Bay Area, which was acquired by Box.com, a publicly traded company, in 2015. I've done nonprofit work in countries including Tajikistan, Bangladesh, Kenya, and India, and I will be your moderator for today's session. So we have a panel from around the world right now. We are talking about the future of the world, and I think this is very, very aligned with that we are all in different parts of the world in different time zones, which is amazing. And a lot is changing. One thing that is clearly happening right now is all of these technologies are leading to an exponential change in the world. And so when you think about exponential change, it's something that we as humans can't really understand. An analogy for this is if I told you to take 30 steps forward, 30 linear steps, you kind of have an idea of where you would be. But if I told you to take 30 exponential steps, it's pretty difficult to conceive what that is. And the answer is you would be from the Earth to the moon and back multiple times. And so the concept of exponential is really hard for us to understand, paired with all the changes that have happened with COVID and this pandemic. The world is changing. We cannot sit around and just expect it to be the same as it was in the last 5 years, 10 years, or even 30 plus years. And so in this panel, what we're going to discuss is two parts. The first part is what is this new normal and how is it transforming the future of both work and education? So we're going to have that discussion. Then we're going to flip to part two, which Asif and Michelle are going to provide tangible tactical advice to both young professionals and experienced professionals who are entering and in the workforce today. So I'm really excited to begin the conversation. Michelle, let's kick off with you. Let's talk about education first. Tell us about what has your experience currently been through the pandemic, going from high school to university, being in a country like Seoul and in San Francisco during a pandemic. What has that been like?
Yeah, for sure. I think I want to start off by saying something that's been really surprising about this pandemic has been that despite being remote for a lot of my education, despite being kind of in different parts of the world or connected through technology, my educational experience has been the most engaging that I've had in the first 18 years of my life. So I can say very confidently that from the experience of elementary and high school, my university experience has been super engaging, just very, very involved and hands-on and interactive, which is crazy because that just goes to show how technology, if used right, can make education extremely, extremely efficient and well-purposed and thought out based on how humans actually learn. So the way my university works is a little different than the conventional university in that we have a purpose-built online learning platform way before the pandemic anyways, designed around the principles of how we learn. And so that's kind of the way that the learning is facilitated that is quite different. Prior to the pandemic, if I zoom back into March 2020, at the beginning of all of this happening, I had a couple of options laid out ahead of me. Most of them were conventional kind of Canadian universities, Waterloo, U of T, Western, all of those. But there was this one kind of outlier, which was Minerva University. It seemed different, seemed kind of implausible or a bit of a stretch, but it was kind of there among my choices. And so at that point, it was very much, how do I decide on where to go, or how will this affect kind of my learning in the future? The first thing being that I think what a lot of university paths laid out for me at that point and how we learn in university was kind of fundamentally wrong. I feel like a lot of the times with higher education, we're taught what to think, not how to think. And that's where the current option that I had and the status quo of how it's been going for the past 2 years was different in that I was learning concrete skills that will be present throughout technological innovation and actually most important during these points of time, like thinking critically, like thinking creatively. like communicating effectively. These weren't just byproducts of something that might or might not be learned through going through classes or lectures or whatever, but actually intentional components that were the foundation of my learning, especially during my first year. So that was really, really unique. And I think another really interesting thing was that instead of focusing on kind of archaic concepts or curriculums that have been developed for 10, 20 years, there is a focus on how do we update this curriculum to focus on some of the world's biggest problems, like climate change or income inequality or all of these types of problems, and actually teach how to solve them. So I found that was really interesting and aligned with my future ambitions a lot. And so that kind of factored into the choice.
Okay, so one last question for you here, and I want to flip it to Asif and get his thoughts on a few things in education. But you chose a school that nobody knows. Usually post-secondary schools, people go because they want the brand name. People want to go to Stanford, they want to go to Harvard, they want to go to MIT. You chose a school called Minerva, which I'm pretty sure most people watching this have never heard of before. Tell us about that decision on why you chose to go to a university that is relatively new, it's just a few years old, that most people don't know about, versus going to a school like Waterloo or Stanford or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. I think there are three main components of my decision making. The first I've kind of already explained, which was what we're learning and how we're learning, and why a place where the next 4 years of my life would be spent intentionally rather than kind of going with the system that already existed. I felt like that was more important to me rather than a name on a piece of paper. I think the second thing was just understanding like what really is important in the long run. I think building these concrete skills that are useful seem to be more of a priority to me than brand recognition or something that is less tangible. And knowing what's important to employers, I think also was really key in that, in this way of actually building useful and unique experiences, I feel like that would have much more value to people rather than the fact that I've gone to XYZ university, because I feel like more and more increasingly, employers are more focused on what is the tangible things that you've done, or what are the actual things that you've built out. And that could be done easily at any institution or even without an institution. And I think the last thing was like the people, the network, and just the environment as a whole. And I can see that there's a shared environment of ambition that makes me want to propel myself forward. And so that, combined with things like the diversity of my class, the fact that there's like 50 different countries represented, and I'm genuinely learning so much from various viewpoints, and having this interesting network of ambitious people really made that decision worth it.
It's been a little while since you were in university. I think we both went to Ivy, and so I wonder, how much it's changed. But given your experience in post-secondary school, compared to now, what do you think? What do you think about this landscape of education and how it's changing, and maybe how it should be changing?
Yeah, no, look, there's a lot of validity in what Michelle said. I think and by the way, I have a son who's applying to high school. Applying to college right now. He's a senior in high school. So I'm living this painful process as we speak. Look, I do think education has and will continue to evolve, right? Like, when we were in agrarian society, so the US or Canada back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, education meant teaching people math, right? Because they needed some math to be able to do their job. And it shifted. We're at the point now where we're in an information economy, right? And no matter where you are in the economy, your economy is being touched by technology in some way, shape, or form. And we're getting more and more into a world where it's not about fact and recall of fact, like what Michelle was talking about. It's more about being able to problem solve, being able to identify what's going on, to come up with a diagnosis of that situation and come up with a solution. And that applies across any job, right? It's not just limited to the information knowledge jobs, it's any job. And so I'm not, while employers are looking less and less at the specific accreditation you have, that does not mean that universities are not relevant, right? Let's be clear, right? For example, in the US, if you have a college degree, if you're a worker and you have a college degree, on average, you make 86% more than a person who does not have a college degree. So the time, the last time that a high school person, like a person with just a high school diploma, could make a middle-class job work in the United States economically was about 1950, right? Those jobs are gone. The high-paying, low-skill jobs don't exist anymore. And so whatever field you're in, whatever your level of interest, you are going to need a college degree. Now, to the point that Michelle was making, not all college degrees are the same. And what you should really aim for is a set of experiences that are aligned with the way you learn, right? I think one of the other big shifts that's happened is people are much more tuned to learning styles, right? And so some people are very much in the experiential sort of case-based, let me do it way of learning, which is great. And that works for a lot of people. And there's lots of universities that do it that way. There's other universities which are much more traditional, lecture-based. Things are written down, things have to memorize. And some of us learn that way. And that's fine. It's not a value judgment. I think that the part that has to go through here is how do you, figuring out what you're interested in, how you're going to learn. And the best thing that what I loved about what Michelle was saying is it's clear how engaged she is, right? It's clear that she's super engaged in what she's learning, and so therefore she's getting a lot out of it. And that's what you got to go find. If you're at an institution and you're bored out of your mind, then you're in the wrong place. You're either studying the wrong thing or you're in the wrong place, and go find something else. And so go back to my son who's applying now. Both my wife and I tell him, look, you're not going to be defined by where you went to college. What you are going to be defined by is the set of experiences you end up with there, the people you meet there, and what you choose to do with it once that's done. And so that's how he's kind of thinking about that path forward. Like, his mother went to Harvard. I went to Canadian universities. He's going to have a very different experience, right? And that's great. And what's happening now in the workforce is that companies want you to have a degree, but just because you have a degree from Harvard or MIT does not mean that you are therefore better than a person who's got a degree from someplace they haven't heard of. And what they tend to do is they look very much, as Michelle was saying, at what have you actually done. And so I think the takeaway for me would be make sure that what you're going after is a set of experiences. Like, it's going to build a set of experiences. The more hands-on, if that's the way you learn, the more international, the more problem solving based. All those things are good. Concentrate less on the name of the institution. Concentrate more on the experiences. And by the way, it's a never ending process, right? That's just the start of your journey. It's not the end of your journey.
This is a really interesting conversation because I think a lot of people think, I get into university and this is where I'm going to learn everything I need to be successful. What we're hearing here is university is just one part of the experience, but it's also what you do outside of the classes in university. Michelle, can you tell us a little bit about some of the activities that you've been involved in that aren't directly part of your formal school, and how that's given you certain, skills or knowledge or mindset shifts in how you're thinking about your life?
Yeah, of course. I think there's a bunch of things, including like personal learning or really going beyond just the curriculum, which I think, again, as we're mentioning, is basically the baseline now with university. And a lot of it is doing your own learning. But I think I want to really emphasize the fact that the environment and the physical location of where you're in and how that really influences the way you think or kind of the way your brain starts to think about the world itself. I feel like in an alternate universe with the other options that I had, a lot of them included kind of being in university campuses. And well, I mean, with COVID, I think a lot of my friends have been just kind of sitting in their bedrooms and watching Zoom recordings, which in their opinions isn't the greatest. But if it were to be even in a university campus, I can see how that kind of would become your whole world, where in certain instances, it might limit the way you think, that what you see immediately around you, these young people, although that is important, it's not necessarily always the reflection of the entire world that actually exists beyond that radius itself. A way I've seen this manifesting is just kind of realizing how incredible it is to be in a completely different country, in a completely different part of the world. Just last week, actually, we had just a random city experience of going to a prison history hall. And what was crazy was that going to this, which was just another average Tuesday for me, exposed me to the Japanese invasion of Korea and how physically I was able to see torture methods that were used on people not even 100 years ago. The fact that I was able to immerse myself and really just vividly be able to see the disparity in the quality of life that existed just 100 years before my existence that I just luckily happened to be in, brought me a sense of gratitude, brought me a sense of, wow, like we genuinely live in this unprecedented time. A 19-year-old living in that period of time and in the exact location that I'm in would have been not even able to think about the next day of their life, let alone career or ambition or the future. And that sense of like overwhelming gratitude was a genuine experience that's changed me. I think positioning yourself in a place to get unique experiences and build perspectives on the world or the problems that exist or just your interests themselves is so important. And so, yeah, I think like wherever you do locate yourself, if you're able to broaden your perspective beyond the confines of your location, it's immensely valuable.
I think if I could just build on it, I think one of the interesting things for me is how education is changing, not just for people like Michelle who are the recipients, but also the institutions that are trying to deliver it, right? So if you're a world-class institution, you used to be limited to how many people you could get on campus, right? That was it. I'm a world-class institution. I have space for 2,000 students or 20,000 students or whatever the number is. That's all I can do. And now it's obvious to almost every university that they can reach as many students as they care to by packaging up what they do and delivering it in a remote first way, right? And so a lot of their courses are now going online remote. And a lot of universities have a much broader catchment area now for students than they ever did before. And what they're struggling to balance with is how do I do that plus deliver the set of interpersonal experiences that I need to give to the students, not just for socialization and networking and so on, but how do I do that? And so I think what you're seeing is this evolving model of a lot of coursework being delivered remotely, but also very, very intensive, sort of internationally based many times, but certainly work-based experiences at companies or at the site of a problem where the students are getting hands-on experience. I think that's the model that we're starting to shift to. And it's interesting to see what's going to come out the other end, because I think you'll end up with a better educated workforce, which has much more experience with dealing with problems day one. Because 10 years ago or 15 years ago, you'd hire students out of college, and the problem is they'd never worked before. Like literally, they had not had So go back now. Now I'm going to sound like a cranky old man, right? When I was growing up, we all had summer jobs, right? We all had summer jobs, and that's the exception today, that students have had summer jobs, right? And a lot of times when you hired in the early 2000s and so on, the people you hired had literally never worked before. And so you had to teach them very basics of working is about showing up on time. It's about coming, being prepared to work, et cetera. And now I think we're going to fix that, because the students today are getting these immersive experiences on top of the coursework and the course knowledge that they would normally have got. And I think you'll end up with a much better educated workforce coming out the other end.
So as we dovetail this now from education to career, because that's really what university is setting you up for career, how is this shifting now? So Asif, you talked about portfolios over resumes. What have you done? Can you tell us more about, how you hire and some experiences that you've been seeing over the past decade and how that's changed?
Yeah, look, I think in the same way that we just talked about how education is shifting, I think work is shifting even faster, right? So, I mean, start with the obvious stuff. Like 40% of all work hours in the United States are now being done from home, right? Think of that, 40%. And if you look at offices around the cities, they are at best about a third full. So we are in remote work, and we are going to stay in remote work, or hybrid if you prefer that phrase. We're not going back to the everyone show up in the office 5 days a week or 6 days a week or whatever. That's gone. And so I think it shifts work and it shifts career materially. Right? When we were growing up, you got your degree and you were newly stamped and minted, and you wanted to go get a job, and you went to where the jobs were, right? I got a degree, and then I moved to London, and I moved to the United States and so on, because that's where the interesting jobs were, right? Today, the job moves to you, right? Like if we're looking to hire engineers, again, just to pick that as an example, right, there's no way we could sit there and say, oh, you need to be in the Bay Area. If we did that, we cut our recruiting down by like 90%. And so we cast a global net, not even a national, a global net. You could work anywhere. It doesn't matter if you're in Banff or Bangalore. It doesn't matter if you're in Montreal or Minsk, right? For us, if you have the experience set and are able to put in the effort, and we think that this is a good fit, we're looking to hire you. And we're not unique. Like most Silicon Valley companies, most tech companies are moving in that direction. And I would say most companies globally are moving in that direction over time, just at different speeds. And so what that means for your career is, I think, is fairly fundamental, is you can choose to live where you want and still continue to work for really interesting companies. I think on that, one of the best hires we ever made at Coinbase was this guy who came to us. He had a degree in history, but he had studied Bitcoin and he had looked deep at crypto. And sorry, I'm not trying to do a thesis here on crypto. I'm just saying this is an example, right? You could extrapolate this example to other fields. It's just someone with a degree, not in the field that they wanted to work in, built up a set of interests in the field they wanted to work in, got to a point where they were really knowledgeable about that field, applied to a company that was smack in the middle of what they wanted to do, and came in with the attitude of, look, I'm smart, but I'll do anything. Whatever job you have, I'm willing to take because I want to be here and I want to learn and I want to contribute. And we hired this guy and we aimed him at, things like, okay, we don't have a customer support function, you go build one, right? Or we need to expand internationally, help us think about that. And he went from role to role to role. And over a few years, he was one of the best people we had. He built up this amazing resume of experiences. And then he was perceptive enough to sit there and realize, things are evolving to the point where lots of people are going to want to invest in this, but not just in this. And it's not going to be individuals only, it's going to be institutions, but there's nobody out there to help institutions invest in this. I should go set this up. And so he leaves Coinbase after a few years, and he's now running one of the largest crypto investment firms in the world, right? And this is just a small example of people who are intellectually curious, who apply themselves to a particular area, build up a set of skills in the area, and then reinvent themselves every few years, spot an opportunity, go out and capture it. And that's a great example of what I think the future of work looks like. And let me now back up. If remote and hybrid is the model of the future, the good news, if you are somebody who in a career, is you can work for anybody anywhere, right? The world is your potential employer, right? The bad news is the world is also your potential competition, right? Because if it's not just you against the person who are local to you, it's you against everybody as to why they should hire you. And so you have to be differentiated, right? You cannot be standard issue, programmer or standard issue accountant or standard issue lawyer. That's no longer going to cut it, right? You have to have a set of other experiences that resonate with your employer or the company that you're looking to get hired by, that you are a better fit for them than somebody else. And I think that's where you get into this constant, education's a never-ending process, and staying engaged and building up a set of skills and building up a portfolio becomes so important, because yes, the entire world is the opportunity, but the entire world is also your competition, and don't forget that.
I think it's a super important point for us, because most people watching this are from Canada and the US, and we're thinking, we're born here, so our competition is just limited to us. But all of a sudden now you have billions of people who are entering the mix from places like India, China, all over the continents of Africa, Indonesia. And there's a ton of smart people there who had never had access to these types of jobs because of their geography. Now what you're saying is, because the remote workforce is opening up, they're now part of that mix. We're all competing against them. And what you're saying, the key point here is differentiation. So it's not enough to just look like everybody else and follow the standardized path. You have to have those extra pieces. Is that right?
Totally right. And look, I know it sounds scary, but it's also a great opportunity. Like when COVID hit, so one of the organizations that my wife and I support helps immigrant women start businesses here in the Bay Area so that they can become the primary income earners for their families, right? It's part of economic development. Okay, most of these women, what do? They start restaurants. Okay, so COVID hits, what happens? All the restaurants are shut. Okay, these are immigrant women living paycheck to paycheck, right? What do you think would be the normal outcome of that? They would all go bankrupt. And instead, because these are driven people, because they have the drive, they basically shifted to a online delivery model. Okay, most of these people couldn't have spelt the word online before COVID showed up, but they created they created websites. They kept their kitchens open, they kept their people employed, and they went to a delivery only takeout model. And most of them now have bigger businesses making more money doing that than they ever imagined that they would get to with just a restaurant. Why? Because in a delivery model, they can serve a much wider range of people. They can serve it over a much wider range of hours, and they can serve it at lower cost, right? And this is one silly example of how many, many, many companies have actually thrived through COVID. They have discovered how to serve more customers. They've discovered how to serve them cheaper, and they've discovered how to serve them in a way that's more profitable for them. Like, look at this conference, right? This conference used to be a physical, in-person, show up, do it, and we were limited to whatever it was, 2,000, 3,000 people. That was it. This conference is now virtual. We're serving many more people with this content. And the question becomes, well, why is it Canadian? Why is it not for any Ismaili anywhere in the world, right? And that's the mindset shift that you go through with things like COVID that create all these opportunities, right? And so, yes, it's a threat, but I think for most people with the right sets of skills and the right drive and focus, it's an amazing opportunity.
Asif, I want to ask you one question that dovetails from your experience at Coinbase. So for those who don't know what Coinbase is, they are exchange for cryptocurrency. They're building kind of the future of finance. And there is no degree for cryptocurrency and blockchain today in school. How is Coinbase, a multi-billion-dollar company, when nobody at Coinbase has a degree in blockchain or cryptocurrency?
Yeah, so you could have asked the same question about, there's companies that are doing, Tesla, right? Building, like, there's no such thing as a degree in electric vehicles, right? You could ask the same things about Impossible Foods. There's no such thing as a degree in plant-based meats, right? There are many areas of the world, and artificial intelligence, virtual reality, everything green, right? Hydroponics, crypto, etc., where the future is literally being invented. But it's being invented with people who have more traditional degrees and skills, right? But they're applying it through interest in those areas, right? So if I know something about how to build a car, it's close enough that I can help build an electric car. If I know how to grow plants, I have some of the basic skill sets to be able to get into how do I make plant-based protein replace animal-based protein, right? And to answer your question on Coinbase, yes, there's no such thing as a crypto degree yet, though some institutions are launching one. But it's basically math and computer science. And so if you come from a maths background or a computer science background, you have a lot to add to this. And that's just for the core of building the product, right? We need customer service people. Coinbase does. They need lawyers, they need accountants, they need all manner of skills. And this is, I think, another takeaway. We're not saying, at least I'm not saying, you need to completely reinvent yourself away from what you currently are to something totally new. That's possible if you're young. If you're Michelle's age, you can do that, right? If you're our age, you can't, right? But what you can do is aim yourself in that direction. So for example, if I'm a lawyer, right? If I don't shift towards things that are emerging, so become more expert in law around crypto, or more expert in law around plant-based proteins, or more expert in law around the electric vehicles, or more expert in law around green, I am going to be left behind, because those are the worlds that are growing, right? So aim yourself at that growth and start to build a set of experiences in those areas, either by working for companies in those areas or building up a set of interests and skills in those areas, and you will continue to grow as fast as those sectors are growing. To not do that is to basically put yourself in jeopardy.
Let's get into very specific tactical advice now with part 2. You mentioned researching stuff, learning things online. What are some very specific resources that have helped you that people can look into, whether it's podcasts, YouTube channels, like where are areas that people can go to right now and start learning?
Just in general, YouTube is a great resource to go to, whether it's things like Crash Course or just technology related channels that are focused on exposing new areas, like 2-minute papers, for example. They're amazing resources. But even more than that, I think there are great, massive open online courses that exist through things like Udemy or Udacity that are great starting points and are very much open to beginners to focus on any range of technology that you're passionate about, or any types of problems that you're passionate about as well. So a concrete piece of advice that I honestly have seen change my life would be to treat your life or the time that you have in kind of focused sprints. So thinking about an area of focus, like whether that be cellular agriculture or artificial intelligence, and thinking about it not as this big ambiguous thing that you're going to spend the next couple of years working on, rather trying to understand kind of like the 80% of the field in 20% of the time, or just breaking down the next kind of month or 2 months that you have and saying, I'm going to try to learn as much as I can about this specific field and learn through doing and building, and then using that knowledge and applying that knowledge and kind of creating at least a baseline for you to start off in, while also talking to people who are already experts in these fields to guide you along that path. And the crazy thing is that like literally anyone can do it now that we have things like LinkedIn or YouTube or just generally Google itself. It's just going beyond that and willing to embrace the beginner's mindset of going into something and not knowing what to do. I think that's the biggest thing in learning about any of these technologies, whether you're young or old. The fact that you need to go back to square one and say, and admit to yourself, I don't know anything about this huge area, but that's fine. And that's exciting. And I can learn about these things rather than taking it as overwhelmed because you don't have an area of expertise in it already.
You mentioned LinkedIn. I think there's this huge trend right now, not trend, but huge opportunity with networking, meeting people from the world on LinkedIn, on Twitter. Most of the crypto activity, for example, is happening in places like Twitter, Telegram. I've personally been networking with some incredible people from around the world on platforms like Twitter now. Asif, what's your kind of thoughts on networking, meeting people, and the importance of that when it comes to both career and education?
Yeah. So look, if there's one piece of advice I could have given myself, back when I was Michelle's age and about to leave college, I would have said, it's all about your network. Everything, if I look back on my career, all the major opportunities that I've been presented with and all the best ones all came out of my network. And what does that mean? That doesn't, it's not about getting into the right club, etc. It's just about meeting people who have a shared interest with you in some area and developing a connection with them, and then doing them random favors, which means, so if they're an entrepreneur, maybe hook them up with someone who could be a customer, or maybe hook them up with someone who could be an employee of theirs or something like that. And don't go in expecting some sort of return immediately, right? This is think of it as an investment, right? That like you're investing in your network, you're cultivating this network, you're building a set of people who have a common set of interests, who are friends of yours eventually. And that is where your best opportunities will come from. Like you, Naveed, were talking about how, you built this network of people at college, and then you use them for advice. You found people to hire through them. It's exactly the same thing. The bigger your network is, the more you invest in your network, the more likely you are to get great opportunities to further your own career. And I want to come back to something that Michelle said, where I think a lot of people don't have the right mindset when it comes to this. They think of it as work. They think of it as, I don't want to spend the time looking at YouTube and learning about this. Like I'm too old for this, or it's just, there's not enough time in the day. That's the wrong mindset. I think your mindset should be, this is an investment I'm making. I'm making an investment in myself, right? How often do you actually invest in yourself, and how much do you make that investment? And I guarantee you that investing in yourself is one of the single biggest returns that you will get, right? So no matter what job you're in or career you're in, or what line of entrepreneurship you have, what type of business you have, if you're not investing a little bit, at least in yourself every once in a while, around learning about, hey, what is interesting that's going on in my field, right? Who is doing my job better or in a more interesting way currently than say I am? If you're not asking yourself those questions and investing some time to go research that, then I think you are willing yourself to fall behind, right? That's exactly what you're doing. And so it's important that you go in with the right mindset. It's not work. It's really literally about learning for the sake of learning and being interested and acquiring these skills this way. And in doing that, by the way, you are better at your network because you have more interesting things to say. You've got more interesting connections to make. Right. And that's how it's a virtuous circle, if you will. You build a network, you build a set of experiences, the two sort of dovetail together, and opportunities come forth. I mean, that is literally what you should be thinking about.
I think the core of what Asif was saying that really resonated with me was the fact that you cannot be transactional. I think that's a big mistake that I see a lot of young professionals making around me, and that I was also very prone to, in that you're looking at all these people who have achieved many things or CEOs of different companies, and you think about it as knowing someone for a professional purpose. I think, again, emphasizing the point of the fact that you can just work on problems that you're passionate about and things and technologies that you're excited about, or just areas of life that excite you, and getting to know more people and learning from them. It should be the core of the interaction itself. And as a young person, I think that the core of what needs to be going forth into the intention of networking should be like adding value. I think that's been a consistent theme in any sort of professional networking, in that how do I think about what this person is doing and try to add some sort of value in them, just exactly as Asif was saying. And so I think that is really the core to networking, at least in my eyes. And the second thing would probably be like building in public and really using these unconventional sources like Twitter, for example, to showcase your work and use it as a bouncing off point for meeting new people. So it doesn't have to be reaching out deliberately to every single person. Rather, if you're able to show the journey that you're on, it infinitely kind of increases your reach to other ambitious people working in the area, because now there are pieces of information that are working for you rather than you having to work for every single interaction.
Yeah, I want to build on that, because the classic definition of networking and what most people have in mind is, oh, I'm supposed to go to all these social events and meet a lot of people and shake a lot of hands and, you know, do all these things. And that is one form of networking, but it's probably the least effective form of networking. The networking that I think all of us are talking about is, you meet people in your professional and entrepreneurial capacities every day, right? And you will, if you just literally spend 10 seconds trying to figure out what brought them to your store, or what it is they're working on, it gives you a way of thinking about what you're doing slightly differently. And that's for people who are sort of comfortable doing that. And there are a lot of people who aren't. Like, a lot of people, like I'm an introvert. I hate those things, right? And so I tend to do things that are more sort of online. And so you can find groups on Twitter. You can find groups socially on other social media channels. I'm not trying to say it's only Twitter. There's tremendous stuff that's being written on in Medium and other things like that. But or Reddit, right? But find these groups that have these interest areas that you are interested in, that you're building some skills on, and at a minimum, read the stuff, right? And then at some point, you'll form a perspective. And when you form a perspective, post something to the group on that, hey, saying, I'm new to this group, but it strikes me that this might be what's going on here. And what you'll find is just that act of interacting with that group will start to open up a series of conversations. People will be like, okay, that's super interesting. Tell me more. People, you will build a network. You could theoretically build a network of people you have never met, right, in real life. And that happens all the time. In fact, in crypto, I deal with people that I have never met. I kind of know who they are, and they know who I am, and we do things together, and we help each other, but I couldn't tell you what they look like, right? And so networking is not the social function that people think of stereotypically. It is literally just staying engaged with a group of folks in whatever manner is more comfortable to you. And if the online manner is the best one for you, great. There's ways to do that.
I think that's a great point to wrap up on. In this conversation, we talked about how the world is changing very, very quickly, both in education and in the workforce. I think 20 years ago, we would have been talking about degrees, we would have been talking about grades, we would have been talking about what universities you go to. Today, what we really talked about, and the two key points that seem to come out really strongly, is number one, build your portfolio, get unique experiences. And number two, build your network. And I think for people listening today, these are extremely important. These are critical, just like how getting a university degree was critical 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Now, having a strong portfolio, having these unique experiences, and having a strong, diverse network is more important than ever before. And so, personally, my top advice to everyone listening to this is have a bias towards action. I always find that people hear these things and they say, yeah, that sounds good. And then they don't do anything. And oftentimes they don't do anything because they don't know what the next step is, or they think, I don't know how to do that. And I would say, do something. And that something might be to reach out to someone and get guidance from them, or ask questions if something here was a little bit vague, or you're not sure really what the next step is. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, for example, get one. If you're scared of DMing someone, direct messaging someone on Twitter or LinkedIn or Medium or whatever, try it and see what happens. And so have that bias towards action. Take that first step, implement something that you learned here today, and I will guarantee you see these outcomes, because you're hearing advice from people who are living in the parts of the world where there is an incredible amount of growth happening, where they are on the cutting edge of what's happening in the future, whether it's blockchain or whether it's at new age universities living around the world. And so I highly, highly recommend you take some of this advice to heart and take action on it. Specifically, build that portfolio and network. And this applies to people early in their career and late in career. There is no excuses on how old you are because this applies to everybody. Well, thank you, everyone. Yaling Madad, thank you so much for joining us. Michelle, Asif, it was incredible to have you guys on. I really enjoyed listening to you guys and having this conversation.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much.